Nobody moved to offer food. Everyone was still processing the fact that they were alive, and that a human was petting a Death-Stalker like it was a common house animal. The scene was so absurd, so completely contrary to everything they had learned about dangerous predators, that their brains simply refused to accept it as real. Tajan shrugged. That is okay. We can work on treats later. He continued scratching behind the Death-Stalker's head and under its chin. The creature's purring had not stopped. If anything, it was getting louder, more content. What is your name? You probably have a designation from the research facility, but that is not a proper name. How about I call you Luna? You have those pretty moon-like eyes. The Death-Stalker, now apparently named Luna, made a satisfied rumbling sound. Tajan took that as agreement. Professor Thalen had managed to quietly activate his communicator and send an emergency signal to station security. He did not want to make any sudden movements or loud sounds, but help needed to come. Even if the human had somehow temporarily pacified the creature, this situation was still incredibly dangerous. The Death-Stalker could turn violent at any moment. That was what the xenobiology tech said. That was what every expert on Vorkanians agreed upon. The security team is coming, Professor Thalen said quietly. They will have tranquilizer weapons. They will be able to safely return the creature to containment. Taijun looked up sharply. His relaxed, friendly expression shifted to something more serious. They are going to tranquilize her? That is not necessary. She is calm now. Tranquilizers are stressful and can cause health complications. Mr. Tajan, that is a Death-Stalker, the professor said, trying to make the human understand the severity of the situation. It cannot simply walk freely around the station. It must be contained. For everyone's safety. I get that, Tajan said, but there are better ways to do this. If you come in with weapons and aggressive intent, you will scare her. Then she will become defensive. Then someone might get hurt. Let me handle this. I can lead her back to the research facility calmly. Ji-hoon leaned over to Myung again. He wants to walk the Death-Stalker back to containment. Like a pet. I am hearing this correctly, right? This is actually happening. Myung nodded again, still incapable of speech. Her gills had finally stopped fluttering quite so frantically, but she looked like she might faint at any moment. The door at the back of the lecture hall burst open. 6 security officers rushed in, all armed with heavy tranquilizer rifles. These were not standard equipment. These were weapons designed to take down megafauna, creatures that weighed several tons. The amount of sedative in each dart could knock out a small shuttle. Luna's head snapped up. Her eyes, which had been half closed with contentment, suddenly blazed bright crimson again. She saw the weapons. Her predatory instincts kicked in. This was a threat. Threats needed to be eliminated. Her muscles tensed. Her claws extended fully. Her tail rose, the spikes along it standing rigid. The friendly, purring creature from moments ago vanished. In its place was the apex predator that had earned the Death-Stalker species its fearsome reputation. No, 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 Tajan said quickly. He moved to stand between Luna and the security team. His hands were up, palms out, a universal gesture for stop. Put the weapons down. You are making her defensive. Get out of the way, civilian, the lead security officer barked. He was a Kravix, a species bred for military service. His carapace armor gleamed under the lecture hall lights. That creature is extremely dangerous. We have authorization to use lethal force if necessary. She was not dangerous 5 seconds ago, Tajan argued. She was calm. She was happy. You brought weapons and aggression, and now she feels threatened. Can you not see that? Luna growled. It was not the questioning rumble from before. This was a proper threat, a warning that she was preparing to attack. Her eyes were locked on the security team. She was calculating distances, analyzing weaknesses, preparing for combat. This was what she had been created for through millions of years of evolution. This was what she did best. Last warning, the security officer said. Move or we fire. Tajan did not move. He turned his back on the security team and faced Luna. The Death-Stalker's attention shifted to him. She recognized him, but she was in full combat mode now. Even her temporary bond with the human might not be enough to stop her from attacking. Luna, Tajan said softly, look at me. Just look at me. Ignore them. The Death-Stalker's eyes flickered between the human and the security team. Her growling continued. I know you are scared, Tajan continued in that same gentle tone. I know this feels dangerous, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Can you trust me? He slowly extended his hand again, just like he had done when he first approached her. This time it felt even more dangerous. Luna was primed to kill. One wrong move, one sign of threat, and she would strike. And she was fast. Faster than the security team could fire. Faster than Taejin could dodge. If she decided to attack, he would die. Hyejin was still recording. Part of her brain, the part trained in tactical analysis, was already cataloging this footage. If the human died, this would become a training video. An example of what not to do. An example of misplaced trust and fatal mistakes. But another part of her brain, a smaller part that she usually ignored, hoped desperately that the human would somehow succeed. Because what he was attempting was either the bravest or the stupidest thing she had ever witnessed. Possibly both. Luna stared at the extended hand. Her growling began to quiet. Slowly, incredibly slowly, her posture started to relax. The tension left her muscles by degrees. Her tail lowered a fraction. Her eyes dimmed from bright crimson to a softer red. "That is right," Taejin encouraged. "That is my girl. You are doing so good. So good." He touched her head again, started scratching gently. Luna's eyes closed slightly. The purring returned, though quieter and more uncertain than before. The security team stood frozen, weapons still raised but fingers off triggers. They were trained for many scenarios. Hostage situations, armed intruders, equipment malfunctions, aggressive wildlife, but nothing in their training had prepared them for a human calming a Death-Stalker through gentle words and head scratches. "Okay," Taejin said, still speaking in that soft, reassuring tone. "Here is what we are going to do. These people are going to lower their weapons. They are going to back out of the room slowly. Then you and I are going to walk together back to the research facility. Does that sound good?" Nice and calm. No stress, no fear. Just a walk. The lead security officer opened his mouth to protest. Professor Thalen, who had found a reservoir of courage he did not know he possessed, quickly interjected. "Do what the human says. Lower your weapons. Back out slowly." The security team exchanged glances. This went against every protocol. But their commanding officer, seeing the situation through their helmet cameras, ordered them to comply. Slowly, very slowly, they lowered their weapons. They began backing toward the door. Luna watched them but made no move to attack as long as Taejun kept petting her. Once the security team was outside, Taejun smiled. "All right, Luna, let's go for a walk." The Death-Stalker stared at Taejun. The human stared back with that same bright, excited expression. Nobody in the lecture hall dared to breathe. The moment stretched out, feeling like an eternity. Every second that passed was a second where the creature could decide to strike, to kill, to turn the classroom into a hunting ground. But the attack did not come. Instead, something strange happened. The Death-Stalker's aggressive posture began to shift. Its raised tail lowered slightly. The tension in its muscles eased just a fraction. Its head tilted further, studying this bizarre prey that showed no fear. "You are absolutely beautiful," Taejun said softly, still holding out his hand. He took another small step forward. "Look at those scales. And your eyes. I have never seen anything like you in person. The pictures in the textbooks do not do you justice at all." Professor Thalen wanted to yell at the human to stop talking, to stop moving, to stop doing everything he was doing, but the professor was too terrified to make a sound. All he could do was watch as the human committed what should have been suicide. Taejun kept his movements slow and steady. He continued speaking in that same gentle, admiring tone. "I know you are probably scared. This is not your home. All these strange smells and sounds must be confusing. Being stuck in a research facility and then escaping into this place, that must have been stressful." The Death-Stalker made a sound, not a growl this time. It was more like a questioning rumble, low and uncertain. The creature took a small step toward the human, then stopped as if unsure of its own actions. "That's okay," Taejin said encouragingly. "Take your time. I am not going to hurt you. Nobody here is going to hurt you." In the back of the classroom, Hyejin covered her mouth with both hands. She was a Torvan, a species known for their tactical thinking and military prowess. She had studied combat scenarios and survival situations her entire life. Everything she had learned told her that what she was watching was impossible. Death-Stalkers did not hesitate. They did not show uncertainty. They killed. That was what they did. It was in their name. Yet here was one, acting almost docile in the presence of a human. Tajin was now close enough that he could have touched the Death-Stalker if he reached out fully. Instead, he held his hand steady, letting the creature come to him. "Would you like to smell my hand?" he asked. "That is what dogs do on Earth. Well, you are not a dog. You are much cooler than a dog. But maybe you would like to check me out first. That makes sense, right?" The Death-Stalker leaned forward. Its massive head moved toward the human's extended hand. Mi-young, still crying silently at her desk, was certain she was about to watch her classmate die. The creature would bite his hand off, then tear him apart, then turn on the rest of them. But the Death-Stalker just sniffed. Its nostrils flared as it took in the human's scent. It moved its head slightly, sniffing his arm, his shoulder, his chest. Tajin remained perfectly still during this inspection, though his smile never wavered. After a long moment, the Death-Stalker pulled back slightly and made another one of those questioning, rumbling sounds. "Is it okay if I touch you now?" Tajin asked. He did not wait for an answer that could not come. Slowly, carefully, he moved his hand up toward the creature's head. Every student in the room was certain this was the moment. This was when the Death-Stalker would strike. This was when the illusion would break and the killing would begin. Tajin's hand made contact with the scales on the side of the Death-Stalker's head. He began to gently scratch behind where the creature's ear structure would be if it had visible ears. "There we go," he said softly. "That is not so bad, is it? You are such a good creature. Yes, you are. You are doing so well." The Death-Stalker's eyes began to close slightly. The crimson glow dimmed. Then impossibly a sound emerged from the creature. It was a deep, resonant purring, like a cat but 1,000 times louder and deeper. The sound filled the entire lecture hall, vibrating through the walls and floor. "Oh, you like that?" Tajin said with delight. He used his other hand now, scratching under the Death-Stalker's chin. "You like the scritches? Who is a fierce predator? Who is an apex hunter? You are. Yes, you are." Do-hyun slowly lowered his raised hand back to his desk. His mind was struggling to process what he was seeing. He had grown up on a military station. His parents were both decorated soldiers who had fought in the Vorkanian conflicts. They had told him stories about Death-Stalkers, about entire platoons wiped out, about soldiers who died screaming, about the nightmares that followed survivors for years. Yet here was Tajin, treating one like it was a pet, and the Death-Stalker was not just allowing it. The creature was enjoying it. Its purring grew louder. It leaned into the human's touch, pressing its massive head against Tajin's hands. Its tail began to sway gently back and forth like a happy animal. "Are all humans insane?" Ji-hoon whispered so quietly that only Mi-young next to him could hear. She nodded frantically in response, unable to form words. Professor Thalen finally found his voice. It came out as a squeaky whisper. "Mr. Tajin, please step away from the creature." Tajin glanced over at the professor while continuing to pet the Death-Stalker. "It is okay, Professor. She is friendly. I think she is a she anyway. Hard to tell with Vorkanians without a proper examination. That creature has killed hundreds of beings," Professor Thalen managed to say, his voice shaking. "It is one of the most dangerous predators in the known galaxy." "Well, sure," Tajin agreed. "But so are humans, technically. We are persistence hunters. We used to chase prey until it died from exhaustion. That is pretty scary if you think about it. But we can also be friends with things." He looked back at the Death-Stalker. "Can we be friends?" "I think we can be friends." The Death-Stalker responded by pressing its head more firmly against his hands, clearly wanting more attention. Tajin laughed and obliged, scratching more enthusiastically. "See? Friends." Slowly, very slowly, the other students began to relax. Just a tiny bit. If the Death-Stalker was not attacking the human, maybe it would not attack them either. Maybe they would survive this after all. Maybe they would live to tell this absolutely unbelievable story. Hyejin pulled out her communicator and began recording. "Nobody would ever believe this without evidence. Does anyone have any food?" Tajin asked, looking around the classroom. "Treats help with bonding. I have my coffee, but I do not think caffeine is good for Vorkanians." The lecture hall fell into complete silence. Not the comfortable kind of silence that sometimes happened when students took notes or thought deeply about a concept. This was the kind of silence that came with pure terror. The kind where every breathing creature in the room forgot how to move, forgot how to think, forgot everything except the primal urge to survive. Professor Thalen stood frozen at the front of the classroom, his 3 eyes wide with fear. His normally blue skin had turned a sickly pale color. The holographic display he had been using to teach about dangerous predators across the galaxy flickered and died. The projection was no longer needed. A real example had just entered the room. A Vorkanian Death-Stalker stood in the doorway. The creature was massive, easily 3 meters tall when it stood on its powerful hind legs. Its body was covered in midnight black scales that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. 6 razor-sharp claws extended from each of its 4 limbs. Each claw was as long as a forearm and looked capable of cutting through steel. The Death-Stalker's head was elongated, with rows of crystalline teeth that dripped with a paralytic venom. Its eyes glowed a deep crimson red, scanning the room with predatory intelligence. Everyone knew what a Vorkanian Death-Stalker was. They were apex predators from the death world of Vorkanus Prime. A single Death-Stalker could take down a military squad in seconds. They hunted in packs on their home world, bringing down creatures the size of shuttlecraft. Their venom could paralyze a Thraxian war beast. Their claws could pierce combat armor. Their speed was legendary. And worst of all, they were intelligent. Smart enough to open doors. Smart enough to stalk prey for hours. Smart enough to wait for the perfect moment to strike. This one had somehow gotten loose in the Galactic Academy station. It had probably escaped from the research wing where xenobiology specimens were kept, and now it stood between 73 students and the only exit from the lecture hall. Ji-hun, a Zentari student with pale green skin, sat perfectly still in his seat near the middle of the room. His heart was pounding so hard he was certain the Death-Stalker would hear it. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to run, but he knew that running meant death. Movement triggered the hunting response in Death-Stalkers. If anyone moved, everyone died. Beside him, Mi-young from the water world of Aqualis had tears streaming down her face. Her gills were fluttering rapidly with fear. She was holding her breath, trying to make herself as small and unnoticeable as possible. In the front row, Do-yun had his hand halfway raised, frozen in the position he had been in when he was about to ask the professor a question. His orange eyes were locked on the Death-Stalker, watching its every micro-movement. The creature took one step into the room. Its claws clicked against the metal floor with a sound like knives on stone. It lowered its head, sniffing the air. The Death-Stalker was sampling their scents, analyzing them, deciding which prey looked weakest. Professor Thalen slowly reached for his communicator. If he could just send a distress signal to station security, maybe they would arrive before the Death-Stalker decided to attack. Maybe they would bring weapons strong enough to take the creature down. Maybe some of the students would survive. His hand moved a fraction of a centimeter toward his belt. The Death-Stalker's head snapped toward him instantly. A low growl emerged from deep in its chest, a sound that vibrated through the floor and into the bones of everyone present. The professor froze completely. The growl was a warning. The next movement would be the last thing anyone in this room ever did. Then Taejin walked in. The human had been late to class, as usual. He was carrying a container of coffee in one hand and his datapad in the other. His dark hair was messy, and he had the slightly tired look of someone who had stayed up too late studying. Or more likely playing video games. Taejin was notorious for his relaxed attitude toward Galactic Academy protocols. He stepped through the doorway, looking down at his datapad, completely unaware of the situation. He was probably checking the assignment schedule or watching some entertainment feed. The Death-Stalker turned its attention to this new arrival. Finally, prey that was moving. The creature's muscles tensed, preparing to pounce. Its tail, covered in bony spikes, began to rise. Its jaw opened slightly, venom glistening on its crystalline teeth. Ji-hun wanted to scream a warning, but sound would trigger the attack. He could only watch in horror as his human classmate walked directly toward his own death. Taejin looked up from his datapad. He saw the Death-Stalker. He stopped walking. For a moment, everyone thought the same thing. The human would panic, would scream, would run. The Death-Stalker would strike. Blood would spray across the lecture hall, and then the killing would begin as the creature tore through the room. But Taejin did not panic. He did not scream. He did not run. Instead, his face lit up with pure delight. His eyes went wide with excitement, not fear. A huge smile spread across his face. He looked like a child who had just seen the most wonderful thing in the universe. "Oh my God," Taejin said, his voice filled with joy. "Is that a Vorkanian Death-Stalker?" The creature tilted its head slightly, confused by this reaction. In all its evolutionary history, prey did not sound happy to see it. Taejin set down his coffee container carefully. He slipped his datapad into his bag. Then he took a step closer to the Death-Stalker. Every other being in the room mentally screamed for him to stop, to get back, to do literally anything else. The human crouched down slightly, the way someone might approach a nervous animal. His smile never faded. His body language was open and friendly. He extended one hand slowly toward the massive predator. And then Taijin said the words that would become legendary throughout the Galactic Academy. The words that would be repeated in disbelief for years to come. The words that perfectly captured the insane, terrifying, wonderful absurdity of humans. Can I pet it? The walk through the Galactic Academy station became legendary within hours. Word spread through communication networks faster than a supernova explosion. Students, faculty, and staff lined the corridors at a safe distance, watching in absolute disbelief as a human led a Vorkanian Death-Stalker through the hallways, like it was the most normal thing in the galaxy. Taijin walked beside Luna, one hand resting gently on her back. He talked to her the entire way, pointing out things they passed. See that? That is the cafeteria. The food there is okay, but not great. Too much synthetic protein. Oh, and that hallway leads to the dormitories. I live down there. Maybe you could visit sometime. Though I would need to check the housing regulations first. Luna made small rumbling sounds in response, seeming to enjoy the conversation even if she could not understand the specific words. Her tail swayed gently. Her claws were retracted. She looked, to the shock of everyone watching, almost happy. Several people recorded the procession on their communicators, creating footage that would be shared across thousands of worlds. The security team followed at a careful distance, weapons ready, but lowered. They had been ordered not to intervene unless the Death-Stalker became aggressive. So far, under the humans' care, Luna showed no signs of violence. It was unprecedented. It defied every study, every research paper, every documented case of Vorkanian behavior. Do-hyun had left the lecture hall with several other brave students to follow the procession. He had to see this through to the end. Part of him still expected Luna to suddenly remember she was an apex predator and start hunting. But the longer he watched Taijin interact with her, the less likely that seemed. The human had somehow formed a genuine connection with one of the galaxy's most feared creatures. How is he doing this? Do-hyun asked Hyejin, who was still recording everything. Hyejin shook her head slowly. I have no idea. This should not work. Everything we know about Vorkanian says this should not work. But look at her. She is completely calm. She trusts him. Humans are predators too, Ji-hoon offered, having also joined the group following behind. Maybe she recognizes something in him. Some kind of predator-to-predator understanding. But humans are social predators, Myung said, having finally recovered enough to speak. We learned that in xenobiology. Humans evolved with complex social structures. Pack bonding. They form emotional connections with almost anything. They have been known to try to befriend dangerous creatures on their own world. There are records of them keeping wolves, and those wolves became dogs over generations. They even try to pet wild animals that could kill them. That is insane, Ji-hoon said. That is humans, Myung corrected. They see something dangerous, and their first instinct is not always to run or fight. Sometimes they think, what if we could be friends instead? They reached the research facility wing. The head researcher, Dr. Velkis, was waiting outside with a whole team of specialists. She was a Thorian, tall and crystalline, her body structure allowing her to process information at incredible speeds. She looked simultaneously fascinated and horrified as Taijin approached with Luna. Student Taijin, Dr. Velkis said carefully, her voice chiming like glass bells. I must thank you for preventing what could have been a catastrophic incident. However, I must now ask you to step away from the specimen so we can safely restore her to containment. About that, Taijin said, still walking with Luna. I do not think she should be in a containment cell anymore. She is clearly stressed by captivity. That is probably why she escaped. Dr. Velkis's crystalline features somehow managed to convey complete shock. She is a research specimen. She must be contained for study and for the safety of everyone on this station. She is an intelligent creature, Taijin countered, and I think she has been treated poorly. Look at her. She is calm now. She is happy. She was not aggressive when I met her. She only became aggressive when people came at her with weapons. Maybe if you treated her better, she would not try to escape. Luna made a supportive rumbling sound, pressing against Taijin's side. Several researchers took involuntary steps backward, still terrified of the Death-Stalker despite her current docile behavior. Mr. Tajin, Dr. Velkis said, trying to maintain her patience. I understand you have bonded with the creature. This is very impressive, truly. Your ability to calm her is remarkable and will be studied extensively. But you cannot keep a Vorkanian Death-Stalker as a pet. It is not possible. It is not safe. It is not permitted. I am not saying I should keep her, Tajin said. I am saying she deserves better conditions. Bigger space, enrichment, social interaction, mental stimulation. These are sentient creatures, right? Not just animals. They should be treated with respect. Dr. Velkis was quiet for a moment. She conferred briefly with her research team through neural communication. Finally, she spoke again. What you suggest would require a complete restructuring of our xenobiology protocols. It would require approval from the Academy Board. It would require significant resources and time. Then get approval, Tajin said simply. Make the changes, because Luna deserves it, and probably every other creature in your facility deserves it too. One of the human traits that other species found most baffling was their tendency to empathize with almost anything. Humans had been known to feel sorry for robots. They named their vehicles and talked to them. They cried over fictional characters in stories. They adopted injured wild animals and nursed them back to health. They formed deep emotional bonds with creatures that, by any logical analysis, should have been seen as tools or resources or threats. Other species saw this as weakness. But in that moment, as Tajin stood defending a Death-Stalker's right to better treatment, it looked a lot like strength. I will bring your suggestions to the board, Dr. Velkis finally agreed. But for now, the specimen must be returned to her enclosure. I promise we will ensure she is comfortable and unstressed. Will you help us guide her back peacefully? Tajin considered this. Then he looked down at Luna. What do you think, girl? Will you go back for now? Just until we can get you better accommodations? Luna, of course, did not answer in words. But she made a soft sound and leaned her head against the human's shoulder. It was a gesture of trust. A gesture that said, if you think it is safe, I will do it. Okay, Tajin said to the research team. But I want to visit her regularly. She needs social contact. And I want updates on the board's decision about improving conditions. Dr. Velkis agreed to these terms. What choice did she have? The human had accomplished what should have been impossible. He had formed a bond with an unbondable creature. He had prevented injuries and deaths. And he had revealed something that shook the foundations of xenobiology research. Maybe, just maybe, the Death-Stalkers were not the mindless killing machines everyone believed them to be. Maybe they were more complex than that. Maybe they could form connections. Maybe they were misunderstood. Tajin led Luna into the research facility. The other researchers parted like water before them. He walked her all the way to her enclosure, which had been reinforced after her escape. Before she went inside, he gave her one more good scratch behind the head. I will come visit tomorrow, he promised. And I will bring treats. We will figure out what you like. Luna purred one more time, then walked calmly into her enclosure. The door sealed behind her with a heavy magnetic lock. She turned and looked at Tajin through the transparent barrier. Her crimson eyes were calm, almost sad to see him go. Tajin pressed his hand against the barrier. Tomorrow, he repeated. Then he turned and walked out, leaving behind a research team that would spend the next several hours trying to understand what they had just witnessed. The story spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within 3 days, every major news network was reporting on the human student who befriended a Vorkanian Death-Stalker. The footage that Hyejin recorded became the most viewed video in galactic history, surpassing even the famous First Contact recordings from a century ago. Tajin became an overnight celebrity. Though he seemed uncomfortable with the attention, he still went to his classes, still submitted his assignments, still lived his normal student life. The only difference was that every afternoon he visited Luna in the research facility. And slowly, carefully, other researchers began to follow his example. Dr. Velkis herself was the first to try. She approached Luna's enclosure with Tajin at her side. The Death-Stalker watched her with those intelligent crimson eyes, curious but wary. Talk to her, Tajin advised, like you would talk to a colleague. She is smart. She understands more than we give her credit for. Dr. Velkis felt foolish, but she tried anyway. Hello, Luna, my name is Dr. Velkis. I am sorry if we have made you uncomfortable in the past. We would like to do better. May I come closer? Luna tilted her head, considering. Then she made a soft rumbling sound that was not aggressive. Tajin smiled. That means yes, go slow. Let her smell you first. The crystalline doctor entered the enclosure with her heart racing. This went against every instinct she had developed over decades of research. But she trusted the human's judgment. She had to. He had proven himself right in ways that defied all scientific understanding. Luna approached and sniffed Dr. Velkus thoroughly, just as she had done with Tejan. Then miraculously, she allowed the doctor to touch her scales. Dr. Velkus's hand trembled as she made contact with the creature she had spent years studying from behind barriers. She is warm, Dr. Velkus said with wonder. The scales are warm. All our thermal readings showed they should be cold-blooded, but there is heat here. She is alive, Tejan said simply. Not just a collection of data points. Not just a research specimen. She is a living being with thoughts and feelings. Over the following weeks, the research facility underwent massive changes. The Academy Board, faced with overwhelming public pressure and undeniable evidence of Vorkanian intelligence, approved Dr. Velkus's proposal for reformed xenobiology protocols. Luna's enclosure was expanded to 10 times its original size. Enrichment objects were added. The lighting was adjusted to match the natural cycle of her homeworld. Most importantly, she was given regular social interaction with approved handlers. Tejan trained a dozen researchers on how to properly interact with Luna. He taught them to read her body language, to understand her vocalizations, to recognize when she was comfortable versus when she was stressed. It was delicate work, but the researchers learned quickly. They had to. The entire galaxy was watching, but the changes did not stop with Luna. Other creatures in the research facility began receiving better treatment as well. Enclosures were enlarged. Enrichment programs were implemented. The entire philosophy of xenobiology research began to shift from pure data collection to something more compassionate, something more human. The irony was not lost on anyone. Humans were relative newcomers to the galactic community. They had only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. Most species still saw them as young and naive, not fully understanding the complexities of the galaxy. Yet here was a human teaching the older, supposedly wiser species about empathy and connection. One evening, Ji-hoon found Tejan sitting outside Luna's enclosure, watching her play with a new puzzle toy the researchers had designed. The Death-Stalker was trying to figure out how to open a container to get the treats inside. She was concentrating hard, using her claws with surprising dexterity. "Can I ask you something?" Ji-hoon said, sitting down next to the human. "Sure," Tejan replied, not taking his eyes off Luna. "Why did you approach her? That first day, when everyone else was frozen with fear. What made you think it was safe?" Tejan was quiet for a moment, considering the question. "I did not think it was safe," he finally admitted. "I knew it was dangerous. I know what Death-Stalkers are capable of. I read the same textbooks as everyone else. Then why?" Ji-hoon pressed. "Because she looked scared," Tejan said simply. "Everyone saw a dangerous predator. But I saw a creature that was lost and confused and frightened. She was in a strange place, surrounded by strange smells and sounds. She was probably terrified. And when creatures are terrified, they lash out. But if you can show them they do not need to be afraid. If you can show them kindness instead of violence, then maybe they respond to that. Maybe they choose connection over conflict." "That is a very human way of thinking," Ji-hoon observed. Tejan smiled. "Yeah, I guess it is. On Earth, we have a saying. You can catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. It means kindness usually works better than aggression. Not always, but usually." Luna successfully opened the puzzle container and made a triumphant sound, eating her reward. Tejan laughed and clapped his hands. "Good job, girl. You are so smart." The Death-Stalker looked over at him, her eyes bright with what could only be described as pride. She brought the empty container over to the barrier and pushed it through the feeding slot, clearly asking for it to be refilled. Tejan obliged, resetting the puzzle and adding more treats. "The galaxy is going to be different after this," Ji-hoon said. "You know that, right?" "What you did here, it is changing everything." "I just wanted to pet a cool alien creature," Tejan said with a shrug. "I did not set out to start a revolution or anything." "But you did," Ji-hoon insisted. "There are already 3 other research facilities that have announced they are adopting Earth-style animal enrichment protocols. 2 universities have created new courses on interspecies emotional bonding. There is a proposal in the Galactic Senate to establish welfare standards for all captive xenofauna. You started all of that." Taejun looked uncomfortable with the praise. It should not have taken a human to point out that creatures deserve to be treated well. That should have been obvious. But it was not, Ji-hoon said. Not to us. We are too used to categorizing things. Predator, prey, useful, dangerous. We put everything in boxes and we forget that life is more complicated than that. Humans do not think that way. You see an apex predator and you see a potential friend. That is your strength. That is what makes humanity special. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching Luna play with her puzzle toy. She was getting faster at solving it, learning the mechanism. Her intelligence was undeniable now. How had so many researchers missed it for so long? How had they looked at her and seen only a monster? Do you think she will ever be able to go home? Ji-hoon asked. Back to Vorkanos Prime? I do not know, Taijin admitted. She was born here in captivity. She has never known her homeworld. Releasing her there might be cruel in a different way. She does not know how to survive in the wild. She does not have a pack. Then what happens to her? We make this her home, Taijin said. We make it the best home we can. We give her everything she needs to be happy and healthy. And maybe, if we are very lucky, we learn from her. We learn how to be better, how to treat all creatures with respect and compassion, how to see beyond our fear to the individual underneath. Luna finished her puzzle again and brought the container back for a refill. This time, Taijin stood up and entered the enclosure through the safety airlock. He scratched behind her head and manually refilled the container. Luna purred and nuzzled against him, completely at ease. Ji-hoon watched through the barrier and shook his head in amazement. Months ago, this scene would have been unthinkable. Now it was becoming routine. A human and a Death-Stalker, playing together like old friends. The galaxy had changed. Maybe forever. And it had changed because one human saw a terrifying predator and asked a simple question. Can I pet it? Sometimes, Ji-hoon reflected, the most revolutionary ideas are the simplest ones. Sometimes changing the world just requires looking at something everyone else fears and choosing kindness instead. Sometimes it takes a human to remind the rest of the galaxy what it means to be truly civilized. He stood up to leave, letting Taijin and Luna have their time together. As he walked away, he could hear the human talking to the Death-Stalker, telling her about his day, complaining about a difficult exam, sharing his thoughts and feelings with a creature that could not respond with words but somehow understood anyway. That was humanity's gift to the galaxy. The ability to connect, the willingness to try, the courage to extend friendship to those who seemed beyond reach, and perhaps most importantly, the simple recognition that every living being deserved respect, dignity, and compassion. The galaxy was still learning that lesson. But thanks to one human and one Death-Stalker, the lesson was finally being taught.